Some signs don't signal an ending. They announce final liberation. Helena Blavatsky described 9 of them, but for 140 years, this list was silenced. Documents that disappear, witnesses who refuse to speak, those who remember prefer to remain silent, especially when it concerns the boundary between what we call life and what lies beyond. Have you ever felt a strange detachment from things you once desperately desired? Or experienced memories that couldn't possibly be yours? What if these weren't random occurrences, but precise signals that your soul is preparing for liberation? What if you're living your final life cycle on Earth and don't even know it? The strange dreams that don't feel like your own. The sudden disinterest in ambitions that once consumed you. The overwhelming déjà vu in places you've never visited. These aren't coincidences or psychological quirks. According to Blavatsky's hidden manuscripts, they're the unmistakable indicators of a soul completing its earthly journey. For over a century, these 9 signs were deliberately kept from public knowledge, not because they threatened national security or contained dangerous formulas, but because they held power far more profound, the power to awaken souls before their scheduled time. Some knowledge, wrote one of Blavatsky's closest confidants, acts as a spiritual catalyst that cannot be undone. The recovered manuscript has finally come to light, and what it reveals might explain the inexplicable feelings you've been experiencing throughout your life. That persistent sense that you're somehow different, that you don't quite belong here, that you're remembering rather than learning spiritual truths. From which city or country are you watching this revelation unfold? Comment below, because what I'm about to share may explain the inexplicable sensations you've been experiencing your entire life, sensations that modern psychology has no framework to understand. Russia, 1884. In a dimly lit room in St. Petersburg, Madame Blavatsky's hand trembled as she sealed an envelope addressed to the inner circle of the Theosophical Society. Inside was not just another spiritual teaching, but a precise map of consciousness. Specifically, the 9 unmistakable symptoms that appear when a soul approaches its final incarnation. The document was considered so potent that it was locked away, hidden from even devoted students. This knowledge, wrote one of her confidants, could cause premature detachment if encountered by unprepared minds. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky wasn't just another mystic. Born into Russian aristocracy, she abandoned a life of privilege to travel the world in search of hidden wisdom. Tibet, Egypt, India, she journeyed to the most remote spiritual centers, studying under masters who recognized something unusual in her. Despite public ridicule and accusations of fraud, she persisted in bringing Eastern wisdom to the Western world when such ideas were considered blasphemous. What few people know is that Blavatsky herself believed she was in her final incarnation, and that the physical suffering she endured throughout her life was the accelerated burning of her remaining karma. "My body pays the debt," she once wrote to a close friend, "so that my soul may finally be free." This wasn't meant for public consumption. It was a private confession from someone who recognized in herself the very signs she documented. Behind her public persona, the controversial writer, the spiritual revolutionary, the founder of Theosophy, existed a woman who understood she was walking the final steps of a journey spanning thousands of years. Her physical ailments, which baffled physicians of her time, weren't random misfortune, but the compressed working out of karmic patterns that would otherwise require several more lifetimes. "The masters have confirmed what I have long suspected," she wrote in an 1882 letter recently discovered in the archives of the London Theosophical Society. "This embodiment shall be my last upon the wheel." What's remarkable is how she described her symptoms, the very same indicators she would later document in her sealed letter about final incarnations. Even her harshest critics acknowledged Blavatsky's extraordinary abilities. Her detailed descriptions of places she had never physically visited, her knowledge of ancient texts and traditions inaccessible to Western scholars of her time, her apparent communication with masters across vast distances. What if these weren't tricks or delusions, but the natural abilities of a soul nearing completion of its earthly cycle? We now know that her most controversial teachings, those most ridiculed by contemporary religious authorities and scientists, have gradually been validated by modern physics, psychology, and neuroscience. What seemed impossible in the 1880s, the interconnectedness of all consciousness, the illusory nature of solid matter, the existence of multiple dimensions, now forms the foundation of quantum theory and cutting-edge consciousness research. For over a century, the letter remained sealed, its whereabouts known only to a succession of theosophical guardians. In 1939, during the chaos of pre-war Europe, the document briefly resurfaced in Vienna, only to vanish again when those who understood its significance realized humanity wasn't ready for such knowledge. The world was descending into darkness, not ascending toward enlightenment. Then something unexpected happened. In 2022, during the digitization of archives in Warsaw, researchers discovered what appeared to be a partial transcription tucked within an unrelated manuscript. When compared with Blavatsky's original notebooks, scholars confirmed these were indeed the 9 signs she had documented with such precision. But something was different about this version. The final sign contained an enigmatic addendum that had never been deciphered. What Blavatsky described wasn't merely theoretical. These signs are being reported worldwide by people who have never encountered her teachings. Psychologists, quantum physicists, and near-death researchers are all documenting the same phenomena, though using different terminology. What Blavatsky called soul detachment, neuroscientists now label as fundamental shifts in reward processing. What she termed recognition of field markers, modern researchers call enhanced déjà vu experiences. As we begin exploring these 9 signs, reflect on your own experience. Have you noticed any of these manifestations in your life? Or perhaps recognized them in someone close to you, someone who seems strangely peaceful amid chaos, detached, yet fully present, familiar with things they've never been taught? The first sign appears so subtly that most people mistake it for depression or midlife crisis. But it's fundamentally different. Suddenly, what you've always wanted holds no importance. According to Blavatsky, when the soul approaches liberation, worldly attachments dissolve without effort. This isn't the painful renunciation practiced by ascetics. There's no struggle, no discipline required. Material desires simply fall away like autumn leaves, leaving behind a quiet clarity. This isn't apathy or disillusionment, it's recognition. A remembering that nothing here is permanent or ultimately satisfying. People experiencing this first sign often report a peculiar sensation. They still participate in life's pursuits, but with a strange sense of distance, as if watching themselves in a play they once took very seriously. If this has begun happening, to you, your soul may be preparing for its final departure from the cycle of reincarnation. But another sign is more subtle and far more unsettling because it disrupts our perception of reality itself. Have you ever walked into a room and been absolutely certain you've been there before, despite knowing it's impossible? Or met someone for the first time, yet recognized their gestures, their laughter, even the pattern of their speech? Blavatsky described these as field recognitions, psychic imprints where previous lifetimes temporarily overlay your current experience. These aren't mental glitches or cognitive errors. They're what Blavatsky called soul traces, moments when the veil between incarnations momentarily thins. Modern psychology dismisses such experiences as neurological misfirings. But Blavatsky understood them as something profoundly significant, evidence that the soul is beginning to access its larger memory beyond this single lifetime. When these déjà vu experiences become frequent and intensely vivid, especially involving places or skills you couldn't possibly know, it suggests the soul is opening doors to its complete record. It's remembering itself beyond the confines of this particular expression. According to Blavatsky, this acceleration of cross-lifetime memory is a clear indicator that the soul is preparing for graduation from Earth's classroom. The third sign manifests in your dreams. Not ordinary dreams, but those of extraordinary lucidity and cosmic scope. Blavatsky wrote that souls approaching their final incarnation experience what she called night remembrances, dreams where they visit higher planes of existence, communicate with advanced beings, or witness the interconnected pattern of all their past lives. These aren't symbolic dreams that require interpretation. They're direct experiences in dimensions beyond physical reality. People report waking from these dreams with knowledge they never possessed before, sometimes including languages they've never studied, scientific or mathematical concepts beyond their education, or profound philosophical insights that transform their understanding of existence. Modern sleep researchers have documented similar phenomena, particularly in older adults, who report increased instances of what they call transcendent dreaming, sleep experiences characterized by a sense of vast consciousness, connection to a universal mind, and access to information that exceeds the individual's knowledge base. What science categorizes as anomalies, Blavatsky recognized as the soul's preparation for transition beyond the material plane. The fourth sign doesn't come from external experience. It dissolves what you've always believed yourself to be. How you cease seeing yourself as someone and begin perceiving yourself as pure presence. The boundaries of identity start to blur, not through trauma or dissociation, but through expansion. The name you've called yourself, the history you've accumulated, the roles you've played, all begin to feel like costumes rather than your essence. Blavatsky called this serene depersonalization, a symptom that clearly indicates the end of the terrestrial cycle. People experiencing this report looking in the mirror and momentarily not recognizing the reflection as me. They're still functioning in the world, still interaction, but the solid sense of being a separate entity gradually dissolves. If your name, past and labels seem increasingly irrelevant, not in a disturbing way but in a liberating one, it may be the soul breaking free from the illusion of separate selfhood. This isn't mental illness. It's quite the opposite. It's the mind aligning with a more fundamental reality that exists beyond individual identity. The fifth sign emerges as a transformed relationship with time itself. Blavatsky described it as the eternal now penetrating the illusion of sequence. People in their final incarnation increasingly experience time as non-linear, feeling the present, past, and future as simultaneous rather than sequential. This manifests in everyday life as a profound presence that isn't confined to the current moment. There's a peculiar sense of witnessing past and future events from a perspective outside time's conventional flow. Conversations may seem to have happened before they occur. Choices feel less like decisions and more like recognitions of what has already transpired in some larger pattern. Einstein theorized that time's linearity is an illusion, that past, present and future exist simultaneously in what he called a block universe. What's remarkable is that Blavatsky described this precise experience decades before relativity theory, noting that souls nearing completion naturally perceive beyond time's conventional boundaries. The sixth sign manifests as spontaneous compassion that transcends all logical boundaries, not the calculated empathy that weighs deservingness, but a boundless recognition of all consciousness as fundamentally one. Blavatsky called this the dissolution of the separative principle, when the soul naturally perceives others not as separate entities, but as expressions of the same consciousness wearing different masks. This isn't an intellectual understanding, it's of oneness. It's direct perception. People experiencing this sign report feeling others' emotions as their own, not as overwhelming empathic burden, but as natural extension of awareness. The suffering of strangers becomes as immediate as personal pain. The joy of others registers as one's own happiness. Neuroscientists have recently discovered what they call boundary dissolution in advanced meditation practitioners, where brain regions that distinguish self from others show markedly decreased activity. What science identifies as an unusual cognitive state, Blavatsky recognized as the soul's natural return to unified perception as it completes its cycle of separate embodiment. The seventh sign appears as an unusual relationship with synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that defy statistical probability. Blavatsky describes souls in their final incarnation as moving in harmony with universal currents rather than struggling against them. Life begins to flow with remarkable ease, not because circumstances magically improve, but because the soul recognizes and aligns with patterns invisible to ordinary perception. People experiencing this sign report an uncanny orchestration of events that brings exactly what's needed precisely when it's needed. Books fall open to relevant passages, strangers appear with crucial information, resources materialize at the moment of necessity. This isn't wishful thinking or selective attention. It's the soul operating in deeper alignment with the cosmic order. It's preparing to fully rejoin. Quantum physicists now speak of non-locality and entanglement, principles suggesting that seemingly separate particles maintain instantaneous connection regardless of distance. What modern science is just beginning to verify experimentally, Blavatsky understood as the natural condition of consciousness beyond material limitations. The eighth sign manifests as spontaneous healing, not just of the body, but of deep psychological wounds that have persisted across multiple lifetimes. Blavatsky described this as accelerated karmic resolution, the rapid clearing of patterns that would normally require many incarnations to resolve. People experiencing this sign report long-standing traumas, addictions, and limiting beliefs simply dissolving without traditional therapeutic intervention. Relationships that seemed irreparably damaged heal with unexpected ease. Physical conditions that defied medical treatment spontaneously improve. This isn't miracle or magic. It's the soul completing its unfinished business as it prepares for graduation from the cycle of embodiment. Epigenetic researchers have recently discovered that severe trauma can affect gene expression across multiple generations. What's fascinating is that this process appears reversible. Profound healing experiences can reset these genetic markers. What science approaches through biochemistry, Blavatsky understood as the soul's natural completion process as it prepares for liberation. But Blavatsky warned that there is a 10th state that no one should force themselves to reach. Attempting to artificially accelerate these processes through extreme practices or substances can damage the subtle energetic systems that guide natural soul evolution. The 9 signs appear organically when the soul is truly ready. They cannot be manufactured by the ego-seeking spiritual accomplishment. In the margin of the recovered letter, written by hand and nearly faded away, Blavatsky left a phrase that researchers almost missed. When forgiveness arises without reason, the cycle ends without return. This, according to those who've studied her complete works, is the 9th and final sign. The spontaneous liberation from grudges, addictions, and repetitive patterns. Not through discipline or effort, but through a lightness that comes when the soul recognizes the temporary nature of all earthly experiences. The spirit, she writes, no longer wishes to correct the world only to move through it. There's a profound acceptance of what is, without the compulsive need to fix, change, or perfect. The soul recognizes that the physical plane is not meant to be perfect. It's meant to be experienced. But on the back of the envelope there was a symbol that has never been fully deciphered. Some theosophical scholars believe it represents the gateway to non-dual consciousness, the threshold between individual awareness and universal mind. Others suggest it's a yantra, a visual tool for meditation specifically designed to facilitate the final transition beyond incarnation. What happens when the soul displays all 9 signs? According to Blavatsky's hidden teachings, the individual doesn't necessarily die immediately. Instead, they enter what she called bodhisattva consciousness, remaining in physical form, not from karmic necessity, but from compassionate choice, helping others navigate their own spiritual evolution. These rare individuals often become teachers, healers, or guides who facilitate awakening in those still bound to the wheel of reincarnation. Modern researchers studying near-death experiences have documented remarkably consistent accounts of encountering beings of extraordinary light and wisdom who seem to exist at the threshold between dimensions. What if these aren't mythological angels or abstract archetypes, but souls who have completed their earthly journeys, yet remain accessible to those still in transition? What does all this mean for you? Everything. If you're experiencing these signs, it doesn't mean physical death is imminent. Rather, it suggests your soul has accumulated the necessary experiences across many lifetimes and is preparing for graduation. You no longer need to strive, accumulate, or prove your worth. Your journey isn't about evolving into something better. It's about remembering who you already are beneath the accumulated layers of forgetting. Imagine living each day with the certainty that the veil is thinning, that your true nature extends far beyond this temporary expression, how would you approach relationships, work, the small irritations that once seemed so important? What freedom might arise from recognizing this life as your soul's final classroom? Have you recognized any of these signs in yourself or someone close to you? Share your experiences in the comments below. Perhaps your soul is trying to communicate something profound about your journey, not just in this life, but across many. Some theosophical texts suggest that after recognizing these 9 signs, there's only one step remaining, but it isn't physical. It's a shift in perception so fundamental that it cannot be described in words, only experienced directly. Blavatsky called it the Great Passage, not death of the body, but transcendence of the limited identity that believes itself separate from the whole. This transition isn't about escaping the world, it's about seeing it clearly for the first time, recognizing the luminous consciousness that permeates everything, including what we've mistaken as solid matter. Modern physics confirms what Blavatsky taught over a century ago. What appears solid is mostly empty space, vibrating with energy. The world isn't made of things. It's made of relationship, connection, consciousness expressing itself in infinite forms. In her final years, Blavatsky wrote that humanity stands at a critical threshold. We are collectively beginning to exhibit some of these same signs, questioning material values, experiencing expanded awareness, sensing the interconnectedness of all life. What if we're not just individual souls completing our journeys, but part of a planetary consciousness approaching its own graduation? The environmental crises, social upheavals, and technological revolutions that characterize our time aren't random chaos, but birth contractions of a new consciousness struggling to emerge. The pain we witness globally isn't meaningless suffering, but the accelerated clearing of collective karma, patterns that must be resolved before our shared consciousness can evolve to its next expression. What if Blavatsky wasn't alone in her discoveries? What if Tesla, Einstein, Jung, and Casey, brilliant minds who pushed the boundaries of human understanding, each glimpsed fragments of this same truth? Tesla wrote about non-physical frequencies of consciousness. Einstein's private letters mentioned a realm beyond time where all exists simultaneously. Jung documented the dissolution of ego boundaries in advanced spiritual development. Perhaps each of these visionaries was describing different aspects of the same fundamental process, the soul's graduation from cycles of incarnation. The Sambish terminology differed based on their particular lens of perception, but the essence remained consistent. Consciousness evolves beyond its current limitations towards something we can barely comprehend from our present perspective. How remarkable that modern quantum physics now uses language strikingly similar to ancient spiritual traditions. Both describe a reality where seemingly solid matter dissolves into vibration and relationship, where observer and observed cannot be separated, where consciousness itself appears foundational rather than incidental to existence. Science and spirituality are converging on the same profound truth that Blavatsky articulated over a century ago. If this exploration resonates with your deepest intuitions, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone who might be experiencing these signs without understanding their significance. Comment below with, "I remember," if any of these signs have manifested in your life. Subscribe and activate notifications. Remember, you're not losing your mind if these signs appear in your life. You may simply be remembering your true nature, beyond body, beyond personality, beyond the limited identity you've temporarily inhabited. You're not alone in this awakening. Thousands are experiencing the same indicators, asking the same questions, sensing the same expanded reality. The truth doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it whispers to those who are finally ready to hear.